The most powerful moment in Better Call Saul Season 6, Episode 13. Better Call Saul has now come to a close, and the show rounded the story off in a way that felt extremely fitting for the character. With it being the final episode of the show, it was filled with moments that were extremely powerful, and was definitely the episode that was the most difficult to decide. But I think I found it, so let's get into it. Here is the most powerful moment in Better Call Saul Season 6, Episode 13. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Better Call Saul is done, and the final episode delivered in completing the arc of redemption that was one that was on the cards for Jimmy. We saw him battling it throughout the entirety of the final episode, and it finally came to fruition and he faced all of his wrongdoings throughout the entirety of his life. There were multiple moments that were close to claiming the title of the most powerful moment in the show's finale, and one of them that came close was the moment that we saw in this singular shot that appeared in the closing few minutes. We'd seen Jimmy face all of his ghosts that were inside of his closet in the courtroom, and closed the chapter of being Saul Goodman by coming clean on his involvement with Walter White, clearing Kim's name, and also speaking about his involvement in what eventually led to his brother Chuck's death. And the price of letting go of Saul Goodman and being able to move on with a clear conscience came with 86 years behind bars, drastically different to what we'd seen him initially move what was a life sentence with 190 years down to 7.5. We witnessed Kim and Jimmy reconnect inside of the prison cell, which reflected a scene that we saw in Season 1 of the show. However, the light was now facing in the opposite direction, almost visualizing the start of a story and the end of a story. And we then also had this shot following that for a couple of seconds. It was of Jimmy and Kim on opposite sides of the fence, with what looked like tons of space between them. I thought this shot was perfect, and really highlighted the mood, tone, and destination of the finale. We had Jimmy on one side of the fence, looking into the eyes of Kim on the other side, separated by space, a divider in the middle, and two barbed wire fences. Kim was on her way out and Jimmy was stuck inside. The fact that on Kim's side there were steps which almost acted as a way of showing that she was able to move on from this life and step forward. But on Jimmy's side there was a slope filled with snow, almost like a trap in the sense that although he'd come clean about everything that he'd done, he had to face the repercussions of his actions and there was no way out. He was stuck there for 86 years. This was also a polar contrast to how we've seen the pair before. A couple once in love, on the same page and wanting to be with each other, were now separated and the furthest apart possible. The mess that they'd both entangled each other in was something that was a thing of the past, and both of them now had two different directions to go in. It was something special. Another moment that came close to taking the spot of the most powerful moment in the episode was the scene where Jimmy was in the courtroom. We saw him start the proceedings as Saul Goodman, and he went on to finish as Jimmy McGill. We witnessed Jimmy speak his pre-rehearsed story that was devised as a way of generating sympathy, and was originally planned to get a juror to be on his side. But once he started speaking, he didn't stop. This was made up of 3 parts. It was made up of the pre-rehearsed section that we'd heard before, then a section that almost felt like he was gloating along with the confession, and then the arc of redemption, where he regretted his actions and was prepared to face them head on, something we saw he'd been putting off for years. He spoke of his first encounter with Walter White and how he was initially put in a situation where he was in front of a grave that was dug to intimidate him, and how he was almost a victim that was caught up in all of the mess. From here, we saw the second part of the story unfold, where he said that he was pivotal to the empire that Walter White was building, and the love of money was something that drew him into the operation, and was a way of him to make millions. We knew his love of the dollar was something that was ingrained within him. I initially thought that this scene was mirroring the behavior that we saw from Walter White in Season 4 of Breaking Bad, when Walt was telling Skyler not to be worried about him, and that he was the one who knocks. A moment that highlighted how valuable of an individual one was, but it wasn't that at all. This was then when we encountered the third part of the speech, and it was the time that we saw Jimmy face all of his actions that he did in the past. Before he started speaking, he glanced over at Kim, and went on to then speak about everything that he'd done, how he was well aware of what was going on, how he made millions, and how he was the reason why Walter White ultimately ended up surviving for as long as he did. But he was also the reason as to why Hank ended up dying. He looked over at Kim again, for a look of validation, something that he often did, but this time he didn't get it. And he then spoke about Howard Hamlin, and you could sense the sheer emotion in his face as we were watching him almost replay the events that unfolded that fateful night. Afterwards, he spoke about his brother Chuck, how he was the best person that he'd ever met, but he was the reason that he contributed to him losing his career as a lawyer and was a big part of why he ended up dying. That paired with some of his final words being spoken saying, "It's McGill, James McGill," fully closing off the identity of Saul Goodman and reconnecting with who he truly was at his core, was something special. This was a representation of him owning up, facing the consequences, and not wanting to lead a life of a lie anymore. However, what I believe is the most powerful moment in the show's finale is one of the final times that we saw Jimmy on screen once he was in the recreational area. Kim was walking off, and we saw that he was on his own watching her walk away. As we cut from back and forth between the pair, we saw a close-up of him where it was just the fence that was in front of him along with himself, and we saw him do the iconic Saul Goodman firing of the fingers to Kim, but with the blankest expression that he's ever done it. This shot showed that he was now incarcerated and the game was over. It's an iconic image in the sense that it was now done and he finally got caught, but whilst being contained and trapped inside of a prison, mentally he was free. It was striking. The blank expression showed that the persona of Saul Goodman was gone, and this was Jimmy McGill. Shortly after this, as Kim walked away, we saw him drift into the background as the wall took over in the main sights of vision, meaning that it was the last that we saw of him. It was powerful, real, and felt extremely natural. Better Call Saul was filled with powerful moments, more so than many other shows that are out there. Each episode contains several moments that could have been discussed and were discussed. I'm going to be putting out a video that contains the 5 most powerful moments in the entirety of Season 6, and we'll then see what the ultimate most powerful moment is. It's a shame that the show is over, but it was certainly a ride that took us on a turbulent, emotional journey over the course of the past 15 years in the universe. And whilst it's now complete, there were so many good times and memorable moments that made this show exactly what it was. So, there you have it. The most powerful moments in Better Call Saul Season 6, Episode 13. If you want to see more videos on Better Call Saul such as endings explained, theories and predictions, and character breakdowns, then click on the I button. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. If you'd like to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review next, then head over to my Twitter, @BrainPilot_, and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What was your most powerful moment? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.